Hey guys, Coach Chris here, back with another video, continuing with my round 2 game of the 2023 Kyle Weeks Memorial. I am so pumped to show you this one, so let's jump into it. Alright, the white pieces played d4, d5, bishop f4 the London, knight f6 developing towards the center, e3 preparing to develop the kingside pieces, bishop f5, and now I just can't help myself, bishop d3. I just love this pawn structure. This is like my new favorite pawn structure in chess. I just love it. These d-pawns and the extra d-pawn give us so much central control. We also get the semi-open c-file to work with. This diagonal is open for the queen. I don't know, just love this pawn structure. And I've been going for it quite a bit lately. e6, knight f3, bishop d6, and now I drop my bishop back. The idea is that if black ever takes, recapture h-pawn, and then I either have the open h-file for my rook, or if I castle, then I'll have a flight square for the king on h2. Opponent played c6, which is I haven't really seen in this specific pawn structure. Of course, across queen's pawns opening this kind of setup is pretty common. Haven't seen it very much here though. It seems fine. I don't think it's wrong or anything. His dark squared bishop fits in perfectly with this pawn structure. I just sort of noted it as haven't really seen anybody play that way before. Anyway, knight c3 developing towards the center. Now he takes my bishop, I recapture h-pawn, knight bd7, and in blitz games leading up to the tournament, when I was still just trying to get in a lot of London games to develop some expertise, I toyed with the idea of, in similar positions, just going for a kingside attack using the open h-file. And those games, generally speaking, didn't work out that great for me. And the conclusion I came to was there's just not enough material left on the board to seriously threaten black's king. Black will have enough defenders after castling, and so I just castled. And the usual idea in these types of structures is to go for a minority attack, try to weaken up a pawn on the queen side, and eventually attack and win it. And so I just went for castling with the idea of playing on the queen side. Queen c7, I play rook c1. Now there's some potential alignment issues that black needs to be careful of. There might be some knight b5 jumps because the pawn will be pinned. Maybe even some knight d5 jumps after e4, for example. Black played a6 to try to rule those out forever. And so could still go for a minority attack plan, but you know, black has made another move on the queen side. Black isn't castled yet, and so in this position I decided to make use of another benefit of having double d-pawns, and that is that I can play e4 and get this central pawn thrust in, creating the perfect center. And if black ever takes, then I can recapture, and then I really have the dream center. So I decided to go for the central base plan. In this position, since black was still going to need a move to castle, and that's what black did here. And this next move is a bit double-edged. I played e5. Now, these pawns are very fluid. They're nice and safe. After e5, there is a chance that these pawns could eventually become weak. And in this specific position, I just decided that it was worth the risk because I didn't think that black would move his knight to g4 or h5. What's funny is the engine says it's absolutely the best move for black. It's not very intuitive to a human because it seems to just walk into knight discoveries, but the engine says it's actually the best move. The only move I really considered was knight e8, and I thought, well, if I'm getting this position after e5, then it's totally worth it because look at how clumsy these pieces are now. I thought that the time it would take for black to untangle, that I could really develop a nice advantage. And the engine already says plus 1.2 here, so that's nice. I went with queen e2. The idea is to connect the rooks, defend b2, overprotect e5. Really, black's only pawn break in this position is f6, and if that ever happened, I wanted to be able to capture and then be exerting pressure on the e6 pawn, the e5 square. Black can never really go for c5 in these types of positions because of the alignment issues. So in the game I was looking at stuff like c takes, and then if knight takes, you can have like a knight a4 idea, or even I was looking at stuff like d4, knight retreats, and then just crushing through on d5. So I saw that line, so that if black doesn't have the c5 break in this position, then f6 is really all there is, and so I was trying to play against black's one active idea in the position. So black resorted to queen b6, and I decided to play on the queen side with my knight and rook. So I went knight a4, hitting the queen, queen moves, knight into c5. Black captured and I recaptured. The engine points out that a3, queen a4 now takes really leaves black with no great move or plan here. Now you probably saw that the engine recommends queen g4. It doesn't strike me as a very human move. I doubt my opponent would have found that one. But if you look at this position, like queen's not really doing anything. This rook can't move. The knight doesn't have, well, I mean, it has one legal square basically right now. So yeah, I mean, this makes a lot of sense. Rook takes c5 was my idea though. And my idea was to pressure the queen side. Knight c7 is, again, the knight's only safe legal move. This connects the rooks. And I anticipated knight b5 from my opponent, because what else? I figured my opponent would want to try to apply pressure to the, air quotes here, weak d4 pawn. And so I played queen c2. And we get to see the idea of this move because my opponent walked into it, played b5 as expected, and I played a3. And my opponent and I discussed this position after the game, and his intention was to play knight takes d4, and then after takes, what he didn't see whenever he played knight b5 was that the rook can move backwards, and black is just down a piece here. And so once he got to this position, he realized that his intended move didn't work, and so we played queen a5, which is the only other square to keep the queen safe. So queen a5. So queen a5 is forced because queen takes away a4, and then after queen a5, then a4 comes. The knight is pinned to the queen, this pawn's protected, and so we're just attacking this knight. Black tries to save it with b6. I need to move my rook away, so now we're taking a pawn, and now the knight can move, but now up a pawn with a rook on the 7th. Just love white's position here. Black challenges the file. I can't take the knight yet because my rook is pinned to my queen, so tripling up on the file so that I can eventually move the queen away and my rook on c7 will be protected. Black plays h6, and now I play queen d2. Engine says this is a pretty good move, but not the best move. My idea was that if after Engine says, let's do this first. Engine says that Queen D1 is the best move, with the idea of take, Rook A8 to protect the knight, B3 protecting the pawn. Then White just has, an amazing position. Black is tied down to the defense of the knight. White controls the file, up a pawn. It's a doubled pawn, but White is still in total control there. What I thought would happen is that he would take on D2, I would recapture, and then we would get something like this. And Engine says, yes, this is still totally winning. I was thinking that I needed to be playing on the queen side here, but the Engine says that the way you actually do this with White is you go for the F5 break, which makes sense. The pawns are pointing in that direction, and so keeping Black tied up on the queen side long enough to make gains on the king side is very sensible. Opponent didn't do that, and instead took the pawn, forgetting that the knight is hanging. And so now I'm just up a knight, A5, doubled up on the 7th rank, exerting a lot of pressure on F7. Opponent played Queen B3, and I offered the exchange of queens on C3. Typically when you're up material, like a piece, the winning plan is to trade off material and win an easy endgame. So Black knows that, didn't want to go for it, played Queen D1 check. Here we see a benefit of the early H takes G3. I've got a flight square. I never have to worry about getting back ranked mated. Opponent plays Rook B8, and really cool tactic here. Pause your video if you want to try to solve it. I've already given you a hint about it. There's a lot of pressure based on the placement of the rooks, so pause your video if you want to try to find the tactic. I'm going to give it away now. Rook takes F7 is the idea, and this was a lightning bolt for my opponent. He was not expecting this. The idea is what happened in the game. Rook takes, king takes, and now check. Hitting the king, hitting the rook. So won another pawn and threatening B6, Queen B3, and here I had to think, and my first idea was to try to find some way to trade off the queens, but it's not so easy. And if I lose the B2 pawn, then Black's pawns look very dangerous and are escorted by the queen down the board for promotion. And so I couldn't find a way to make a queen trade work. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I'm also up a knight, and there's nothing defending the king. And so I started looking for mates, because I'm up a piece, and the king has no shelter, and I eventually found one here. Pause your video again if you want to try to find the checkmate here. See if you can work it out all the way to mate. I'm going to reveal it here, and I did find it all the way. It's probably the most beautiful mate I've ever played, certainly that I've ever played in a tournament game or over the board. Maybe just the prettiest mate I've ever played. The idea is Queen G8, taking away flight squares. Opponent plays Queen takes D3, trying to come to the king's rescue, but it's too late. Knight H4 check, king comes forward, Queen takes G7, and the queen needs to stay on D3 to take away this square, so he played B5, but after G4 check, sacrificing the knight, we get to deliver checkmate with G3. Here my opponent resigned, seeing that the only legal move was to give up the queen, but we still get in the pawn checkmate. So, really beautiful game. How often do you get a pawn checkmate? It's pretty cool. Hope you got something out of it. Keep grinding those tactics. Thanks for watching.